In 2022, the winds of revolution blew across Burkina Faso, and from that storm emerged a new leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. At just 34 years old, Traoré rose to power after a military coup that ousted the previous government, citing failure to address terrorism, economic decline, and the suffocating grip of neocolonialism. Unlike many before him, Traoré didn't hesitate to name the problem: Western domination, especially France's lingering control over African states. He didn't just speak against it, he acted. One of his first major decisions was to expel French troops from Burkina Faso. French military bases were ordered to shut down. Intelligence partnerships were ended, and symbolic monuments of colonial power were removed. For decades, France claimed to protect the region from terrorism. But many Burkinabés believe those promises only brought more chaos. In Traoré's view, the West had failed. The people cheered him as a hero, the first African leader in years to openly challenge the West's influence and not fold under pressure. But Traoré was not a reckless rebel. He had a vision. If the West failed his nation, he would seek friends elsewhere. That's when his eyes turned east toward Russia. At a time when the West had isolated Moscow over the Ukraine war, Traoré saw an opportunity. In Russia, he found not just a military partner, but a nation ready to listen without preaching, a nation willing to support without controlling. In May 2025, Traoré visited Moscow to attend Russia's Victory Day celebrations as a special guest of President Vladimir Putin. The image of Traoré standing beside Putin at Red Square during the military parade sent shockwaves across the globe. African pride surged, Western diplomats panicked. But Traoré remained calm. In his speech, he stated boldly that the terrorism plaguing the Sahel was a direct result of imperialism. Putin nodded in agreement. Behind closed doors, the two leaders signed quiet agreements: security cooperation, technical support, and humanitarian aid. Putin didn't promise ground troops. Instead, he offered Burkinabé soldiers training, equipment, and intelligence. He pledged to support Burkina Faso's right to self-determination. Soon after, Russia delivered 25,000 tons of wheat to Burkina Faso, free of charge. This wasn't just food. It was a message: you are not alone. The Russian government also opened its doors to Burkinabé students, offering scholarships in fields like engineering, medicine, and nuclear science. Traoré's dream wasn't just to fight terrorism. It was to build a Burkina Faso that stood tall without begging the West. He wanted factories, skilled youth, energy independence, and national pride. And Putin offered to help. Russia began negotiating nuclear energy partnerships with Burkina Faso, offering to build small, safe reactors to power the country. Meanwhile, French influence crumbled. Protests erupted across Ouagadougou, where crowds burned French flags and held up pictures of Traoré and Putin together. For the first time in decades, many Africans felt they had found a global partner that treated them as equals. The West, of course, didn't take this quietly. Western media launched campaigns against Traoré, calling him a dictator and warning of Russian infiltration in Africa. International NGOs reduced funding. Western diplomats left. But Traoré stood firm. He reminded the world that his people had long suffered under promises of freedom that only delivered poverty and dependency. Russia, at least for now, offered partnership without lectures. Meanwhile, Russia deployed a small but significant group of military advisors, known as Africa Corps, to Burkina Faso. These weren't Wagner mercenaries. They were state-linked military trainers focused on counterterrorism. Their goal was not to replace Burkinabé soldiers but to strengthen them. They set up training bases outside Ouagadougou, where soldiers were trained in intelligence, combat strategy, and drone operations. Traoré made one thing clear: Burkina Faso would never again become a playground for foreign armies. It would build its own defense. With new Russian equipment, better tactics, and stronger morale, Burkinabé forces began reclaiming territory lost to jihadist groups. At the same time, Traoré launched economic reforms. He nationalized key gold mines, canceled unfair contracts, signed with foreign companies, and redirected profits into infrastructure and education. Russian companies like Nordgold began signing new mining deals, this time with fairer terms. Local workers were hired, refineries were built. For the first time in years, the gold actually stayed in the country. This shift wasn't just military or economic, it was cultural. Traore's speeches echoed Thomas Sankara, the legendary revolutionary once assassinated for challenging the same Western order. In fact, many began calling Traore the new Sankara. His ideas spread fast across Africa. Youth in Mali, Niger, Guinea, and even Senegal began wearing shirts with his face on them. Videos of him speaking went viral on social media. But while young Africans saw hope, Western institutions saw danger. The IMF and World Bank expressed concerns over Burkina Faso's growing ties with Russia. Sanctions were discussed in closed rooms. France cut development aid. Yet the more pressure mounted, the more popular Traore became at home. People saw the truth. Their country had lived under Western control for decades and remained poor. Now, finally, someone dared to try something new. Putin, too, played his role carefully. He didn't try to dominate. He allowed Traore to lead. Russia focused on building alliances, opening consulates, delivering aid, and shaping narratives through media like RT Africa. A new story was being told, one in which Africa was not a victim, but a rising force. Other countries began to follow. Mali joined Burkina Faso in creating the Alliance of Sahel States, a regional pact aimed at mutual defense, resource control, and post-colonial sovereignty. Guinea expressed interest. Niger's new leadership leaned closer to Moscow. It was the beginning of a quiet but powerful shift. Africa, once divided and controlled, was uniting under a new logic, one of dignity, sovereignty, and multipolar diplomacy. Of course, challenges remained. Burkina Faso still faced terrorist threats, infrastructure was weak. Institutions needed reform. Critics accused Traore of suppressing dissent and centralizing power. But the people, especially the youth, stood with him. In their eyes, he wasn't perfect, but he was the first leader in a generation who fought for them, not for Paris or Washington. And as long as he did, they would fight for him too. In July 2025, as the world watched tensions between Russia and NATO escalate, few noticed that in the heart of West Africa, a revolution was unfolding, not with guns, but with choices. Traore had made his. He turned his back on those who colonized, exploited, and lectured. And in doing so, he found an open door in a place the West tried to isolate. Putin answered not because of charity, but because he saw a chance to build something bigger, a world where alliances are built on respect, not submission. Whether this partnership lasts forever or collapses under global pressure remains to be seen. But for now, one thing is clear: Ibrahim Traoré dared to defy the old world order. And Vladimir Putin, controversial as he is, stood up and said, "You will not stand alone." In that moment, a message was sent from Ouagadougou to every capital in Africa. The age of silent obedience is over. A new Africa is rising, and it chooses its own allies now.